Finally, some preseason Hornets basketball to discuss. It won't be long before we make it the real thing. LaMelo, Tidjane Salaun, Brandon Miller, Charles Lee coaching strategies. We'll get to all of it today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast. And that does include YouTube. By the way, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com to get started. There's Doug Branson. You can find him on his Substack, Every Hornets Box Score. They are pumping out content over there, folks. David Walker helping him out over there. The Substack, EveryHornetsBoxScore.com, on top of the Every Hornets Box Score YouTube channel. Subtext, lots of subs for Doug. We've talked about it before. It's sub season. Make sure you subscribe however you can for Doug. Also follow him on Twitter at Doug Branson LOH. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. New season, new setup, baby. We got the neon sign in the background. After I figured preseason, we got the lighting to figure out. Like we'll make sure everything is Gucci for the regular season. But like right now, I just decided, you know what? It's time to go with the neon sign, the new background, and we're out here doing big things, Doug.
I love it. Finally stepping up your game. I really appreciate it. I mean, you are as a person, I think you're the more attractive of the duo. You're younger, you're fresher. I like that. I think you got a new cut. The hair looks good.
Yeah,
the eyebrows are always on point. And so, all I had was my background, and now you upstage my background too. I do love the old school logo. We used to have this old school logo for Locked On Hornets. It was like a ball, but it was a hornet. And the whole network modernized, and it was good for the network, but It meant the death of our old logo. So I like that you are. It's almost like a shrine to our old logo, and I love it.
I've meshed it here. They gave me a little sign as well, so that's the neon sign in the background. So I meshed it right. The metallic purple background, the old logo. Did a couple of other alterations to make it pop. So there you go, baby. We're off and we're rolling. It is a new Charlotte Hornets season. All right, so we got to see them tip off for the first time in preseason. So much new, right? Charles Lee, Jeff Peterson. We get to see some new guys even on the court, despite still having some of their core members here. One of those guys was Tidjane Salaun. And you know what else is new, Doug? The amount of time that these players get to play on the court with one another for the first time in quite some time. Let's do this. So many times when there's a lot to talk about, it's great for content, but we get disorganized. We don't know what to get to first. What's the biggest story here? I think there are like 2 or 3 in the running. What do you think is the biggest story from preseason game number 1?
Well, I think like from a 30,000-foot view, the story of this game is that all the talk in media day and training camp of togetherness, of buy-in, of defense, it was a lot of talk. And because we didn't get to watch training camp, we only could take the word of Coach Lee, of all these guys saying good things. And now we finally got to see it on the floor, and I think a lot of it was confirmed. There were a lot of players that have traditionally not locked in on defense that were coming out in this first preseason game and doing so. You saw LaMelo Ball, first play of the game. He gets a little bit beat off the dribble, but he recovers and gets a chase down block. And I think just throughout, the Hornets maintained energy, particularly that starting unit and the starting rotation that was injured. I mean, 4 injuries to rotation players going into this game. And they managed to, hang with the New York Knicks for the first half, 61-61. So that's really sort of my 30,000-foot story. And then I think the biggest story, probably a tie between like players like LaMelo looking like no rust and Tidjane knocking down a bunch of threes.
Okay, well, maybe we just give the nod to the star. Maybe we just roll with LaMelo because, after all, he is the franchise player. We're hoping for him to become the franchise player after some injuries that he's battled the last couple of years and some narratives that he's battling the last couple of seasons. You're right. LaMelo looked good. I think, one, you can see the effects of having a full offseason under your belt. It's not like he's had that. He did not have that last year, where Steve Clifford, after the fact, told us that LaMelo had been out all the way up like until right at the start of training camp in the 2023-24 campaign. You get a full offseason. He's been working, and I think you see the immediate benefits of that. You start to see the stat line, 6 of 14 from the field, 18 points. How about a bunch of three-point shots? We even see him get to the cup right at the beginning, right? The first bucket that he hits, the first shot attempt that he has. And Eric Collins, beautiful call to set it up, by the way. His first shot in a while, and then finger roll, bank in, beautiful thing. So this is also true of Brandon Miller, but right kind of shots taken for these guys. For really most of the team, but even LaMelo putting up a lot of three balls here. LaMelo looked really good, Doug, and it doesn't look like you saw the rust either.
No, and it's not only about having a full offseason, it's about having a full offseason in Charlotte with a lot of his teammates involved, aligned with the team, wearing some kind of ankle support, whether it be tape or braces or however you want to define it. He was wearing it, and he looked comfortable, like he was driving, looking for fouls early in the game. He wasn't getting them. He did pick up one, I think, a little bit later. But he was aggressive on the drives, and we had a question in our live chat for every Hornets box score after the game. Does that make you afraid when he drives like that? And I said it would make me afraid if he didn't drive like that. You got to test the ankle, baby. You got to look, if it's either going to be healthy or it's not. And you're not going, this isn't Schrodinger's cat. You've got to open the box and find out if the cat is alive or dead. You've got to test the ankle, and that's what LaMelo Ball did. I thought it was interesting. I'd love your thoughts on this, Walker, is that I thought early in the game he had a couple drives, but then for the most part, it seemed like Brandon Miller was doing a lot of the play initiation. LaMelo, and Eric noted this on the broadcast too, playing a lot more off ball. Like a lot of those threes that he hit, 4 of 10 from the field, 40% from three, a lot of those he was being passed to. So that's kind of an interesting development as we move forward in this season.
Right. Okay. So if we go back to the question you asked at the beginning of the broadcast, do we take the 30,000-foot view, or do we just go up a little bit in elevation to take the immediate concern view? It's not even a concern, but it is interesting. You're right that a lot of those shots for Brandon, a lot of them three-point shots, only 1 2-point field goal taken in this game. Is this the answer to the high usage player chemistry issue? And again, I say quote unquote issue. I'm not saying it's a concern. It's just something you got to figure out. So is the answer LaMelo having the basketball in his hands constantly, Brandon and Miles both playing more so off ball, and those two splitting the baby? Whereas maybe you originally thought LaMelo would still have high usage, but Brandon would be next pretty easily. Is that not the answer anymore, right? Like, is the answer just LaMelo is still your point guard? He's still doing everything. Brandon and Miles are now like these hybrid connectors, hybrid go get me a bucket when we need it, but Brandon is the outside threat. Miles can be the outside threat and then drive as well. Is this just LaMelo's team, where we always knew it was going to be his team? I'm trying to word this carefully. We always knew he was going to have the basketball in his hands constantly, right? But is this really like solely LaMelo, this is your offense, run it. Brandon, sorry, off ball, get ready to shoot. Miles, sorry, off ball, get ready to drive and attack space. Is that what Charles is going to do for the rest of the season? One game, 20 minutes with starters, but maybe that's the answer, Doug. And I don't know if we discussed that enough, or it's still just LaMelo's show.
If this usage holds, which it won't, but it's the hilarious usage numbers in this game. LaMelo Ball, 42.8.
Yeah.
That would be league leading by a mile. And then Brandon Miller at 22.1. You compare that to Miles at 20. Tre Mann, who was leading a lot of the second unit, which is interesting. I mean, more ball was in his hands more than Vasa.
Love what we got from Tre. Yeah,
they were. Oh yeah, we're going to talk Tre. We're going to talk more Brandon tomorrow and Miles. I mean, there's a lot to get to, and we've got a show to do tomorrow as well. So stay tuned for that. But Tre Mann was 31.2%. I think that here's my opinion on it. This season, it's going to be LaMelo's show as Brandon learns to be 1v1 ISO guy. There was an interesting play early in the game when Brandon Miller, I think, was up against Mikal Bridges on the wing, and he hesitated. Like, it looked like he had an opportunity to pull up for three or maybe make a little, move there to get some space. He hesitated. He passed it away. I think Brandon Miller's still learning how to be Paul George ISO guy. He's going to be learning that this season. Next season, if all that holds and everyone stays healthy, I could see this transitioning. That conversation is going to be heavier next season than it will be this season. This season, it's still LaMelo's team.
Which it still suits Brandon's game best for that. I mean, the idea of Brandon Miller is what we're so excited about. The current player we're also excited about, but the idea of him becoming an all-star. I'll say this. With a few of the preseason questions that we have, I think the LaMelo flirting with an all-NBA nod takes, those look pretty damn good. The Brandon Miller reaching an all-star spot, I think those take a tiny hit. Again, really, really tiny after 20 minutes of action in preseason. That's the umbrella in which we're discussing all of this, correct? So we are under that umbrella. But if this is a trend that, for the most part, goes through, I think the Brandon all-star nod probably takes a tiny hit in his second season, where the LaMelo all-NBA nod, like, we got some real shots here, maybe those odds for him to make it. If you wanted to dig into FanDuel prop bets a little bit,
oh boy.
maybe that would be a good payout. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Let's get to the rookie. He played a decent amount yesterday. Gotta like what you see. We'll discuss some of those details from Tidjane Salaun coming up next. LOH. Before we get to the next segment, I want to tell you about BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try, because Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us. But what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them. I'm telling you, sometimes you got fears that don't have to be Halloween costumes, Doug. It's a real thing, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. So again, if you're thinking of starting therapy, BetterHelp is right for you. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can even switch therapist anytime for no additional charge if you feel the need to do so. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On Hornets ahead.
Back here on the Locked On Hornets podcast, Walker, I've got some quotes from Charles Lee, his first post-game press conference, preseason, not his first regular season, but it still counts in my heart. He said, quote, "I thought we took another step tonight." He said it was a really good defensive game all around for his team, and he's been honest with his criticisms, particularly of the teams of past that he wasn't even involved in. So I think you got to kind of take his word for it here. And then he talked about LaMelo's defense. He said LaMelo took on the challenge pregame of guarding Jalen Brunson, who was 1 of 4 from the field for 3 points in the first quarter. And he said, quote, "You saw him refusing to be screened." So big love for LaMelo there. And then finally, he complimented Tidjane Salaun, who had 11 points on 3 made three-point field goals, for, quote, simplifying his game, holding his spacing on offense. He said he had a tendency in camp to slash too much and clog the paint. And here's the big quote. Tidjane Salaun, he said, he's going to be a game changer for this organization.
Okay, let's have the conversation. You and I both have not been buyers of Salaun having a rotation spot this year, based off the quotes in training camp, based off of what we had even seen in Summer League. Yep. Here, preseason game against the Knicks, the opener, baby. He hits his three-point shots. Tidjane yesterday goes 3 of 5 from beyond the line. He was 4 of 8 overall from the field. He finished with 11 points, 1 rebound, surprisingly, in 22 minutes of action. No assists, no steals, no blocks. Okay, yeah, fair enough. We'll get to it in just a moment. Tidjane Salaun, rotation spot, what you saw from him. What are your thoughts there, Doug?
So offensively, I loved him because he's not timid, he's not scared, he's unafraid, and I thought he did simplify his games. Although I will say he called for the ball, I will conservatively estimate 17 times when he checked into the game until he got the ball on that left wing when he drove and hit the little soft hook. But I love he hits that, and then immediately, like I think the next play, transition, LaMelo passes it to him. And again, I'll say like 999 out of 1,000 rookies would have held the ball in that situation, waited for the offense to come to him and then, move the ball. But instead, immediately jacks up a three and knocks it down. Rapide Sonk! We've got it again here in Charlotte. A little quick 5 points from Tidjane. I loved what I saw offensively. There's so much promise, so much hope. I think he can be a game changer there. Defensively, he's got a body for defense. He has no idea how to use it. His correct. IQ isn't there. His timing isn't there. I said I wasn't surprised by the rebounding because he's not in a position to rebound. It's not even about like him getting out physical, him not hitting first. He's not even around where he should be and the ball is going to land. Like he's just nowhere near it. That is what's going to have to develop in Greensboro. We can be excited about everything that he's going to become, and we can dream and we can hope, and I am, and I see it. I see the echoes of freakiness. Giannis. We can do two things at once. We can be excited about that, and we can be realistic about where he is right now. And if you want to win basketball games, like where he needs to be to get serious rotation minutes.
Yeah, just not chopping his feet on closeouts, opening up his hips for guys driving, and then once he's beaten off the dribble, doesn't exactly know where to rotate to, know how to beat his man to the spot in some of those situations. That's what it's going to be with Tidjane. And if you're not going to shoot 60% from three, Nate, let's say you're not going to shoot. He's 3 of 5 from the three-point line in this game is my point. If you're not going to shoot 40% from three, which we don't expect that to happen for Salaun this year, then it's going to be tough to justify putting him out there on the court if defensively we just don't trust him nearly as much. And that's us. Those are the novices watching the basketball game. This is Charles Lee, who considers himself a defensive-minded coach that has been on 60-win teams, championship teams that get on a really deep playoff run because of their defensive calling card. And they want to win games this year. I'm certain Charles Lee, I know that there is this big idea of them building a culture to the point where once they get to the postseason, they're built to last. But even still, right, you're not going to lose as many games as possible in order to get a draft pick this year. We'll see the direction they take. They want to win games is my point. And if Tidjane Salaun is out there, I don't know if he is the best option compared to some of the other options that you have. He did play a lot of minutes in this one. He played starter minutes, like all the starters got to 20. Salaun got over 20 in this game too. So they really wanted a good long look at him. I like the way that they're handling Tidjane, and I like what we're seeing offensively. The fact that he's hitting shots, it's great. I'm with you. I think still, if you do not think that he's going to, be a guy that sees the floor a lot this year, I'm not sure defensively if you saw anything that changes your mind.
No. Now, there's a lot of preseason left, and if Mark Williams stays out the whole time, the reason he played a lot of minutes is because Mark was out, so then you've got Nick and Taj, and then Grant Williams also late scratch with a hamstring issue that seems minor. Nick Smith Jr. also missed this game. We'll talk more about Tre Mann, who opened up a lot of opportunities for himself with Nick Smith Jr. and Cody Martin out of this game in tomorrow's episode. But, so he got the minutes and he took advantage of them. Let's be fair about it. And let's be fair about this. If he does get a lot of minutes for the rest of the preseason and shoots 60% from three, I think it does put a little bit of a pressure on the coach to do something. I mean, if he's going to be that undeniable on offense, but you and I understand, and we've seen this enough times to understand that, like, that's very improbable. And we saw it in Summer League, honestly. He looked great in that first Summer League game, and then in the Summer League games that came after it, he didn't look so great. And so, it's as much about coming out and having that first performance. It's more about, like, sustaining it. Can he sustain it?
With Tidjane Salaun being a guy that was so raw, considered a really raw prospect coming out into the draft, I think as a raw prospect, he's decently ahead of schedule. You have to be really happy with what you've seen from him so far. If you're talking about an immediate contributor, he's still behind. Good news for Salaun is no one thought he would come in as a real immediate contributor. I know there's some people out there that think that he should see the floor because he's a 6th overall selection, and guys that are drafted that high, they see minutes in their first year. So this will be, I don't know about unprecedented, but there's not a lot of precedent for somebody in Salaun's position to not be playing a decent amount of minutes his first year. But again, as a raw prospect, ahead of schedule, like what you see as an immediate contributor, probably behind schedule, and that's okay with me.
Defensively, I would love for him to get some wins in G League, where defense is honestly, if you're committed to the defensive end of the floor, can be a little bit easier to play because things aren't as complex and you get more one-on-one matchups. You're going to be able to learn some things in Greensboro that you might just get taken advantage of over and over again in the NBA. And yeah, you can learn from mistakes, but there's a certain point at which the mistakes just pile up and start to nick at your confidence. Here's what most excites me about Tidjane from this first preseason game. It's not the three-point shots that he made. It's not even the sort of irrational confidence that is a signature of star play in the NBA, like guy that just goes out there and shoots it, and you go, why are you shooting that? Oh, you made it. Like irrational confidence. That's not what excites me. What excites me is what Lee said in that quote that I opened up with, that in camp, he was making things overly complex. He was cutting when he shouldn't have been cutting. He was doing things like that. And then you saw it in the preseason game. He quickly made improvements. That's what should excite you most about Tidjane, that they said, hey, TJ, you're doing these things wrong. Clean that up. First preseason game, guess what he did? He cleaned them up. But defense is a whole nother bag of beans. It's much more complex, and I think he is going to have time in Greensboro. But I'm thrilled with that first performance from Salaun.
Are we going to try to make TJ a thing?
Well, they have. I think they've called him. Okay. I think they've called him TJ. Now, I added the Sally part, TJ Sally. That's kind of what I've been going with because I just think it sounds cool. But listen.
What is?
It doesn't? TJ Sally, baby.
No, it does. It does.
John Sally?
It does. I got you. No, it does. I just, that was a funny reason as to why you just decided, hey, let's throw a Sally at the end there.
Listen, I'm all gut, baby. When it comes to the saying, Stangin or Clangin, some of the stuff, the sickos, it's all from the gut, baby.
All right. Well, let's get to more TJ Sally, Stangin or Clangin, all that stuff Doug was just talking about. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Nick Richards, Stangin or Clangin, Miles Bridges, athleticism. We can get into detail a little bit more as the week goes on, but we'll give you some initial thoughts on the other observations that we had in this preseason game number 1 coming up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. NBA fans, you can also start the season with a big return on FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I want everything on the same page guy. I hate opening up different tabs. I hate having to exit out of one, go to the other, check something out there. If it's all in front of my face, I love it. FanDuel gives me that option. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. I like that too. I like money as well. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just put $5 on it. Put $5 on it, and then you get $200 back. It's fantastic. FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Stangin or Clangin, the first actual basketball version this year of Stangin or Clangin. Let's get to it, Doug. What are the options that you want to throw at me first?
So I think you and I are both agreed, right? LaMelo Ball, Tidjane Salaun, both Stangin performances from those two guys. Great. All right, so let's go to the next guy, Tre Mann, who was second in game score according to pivotfade.com for the Charlotte Hornets. 15 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists for Tre Mann. Stangin or Clangin?
Stangin. Tre Mann was awesome in this game. We love we love us some Tre Mann. Look, this only continues, Doug, after I don't know about being freed from Oklahoma City. Maybe that is the right word. There's just too many guys over there. It's why we were able to get some talent, whether it be in the form of Micic, Tre Mann, whatever. Come on down. If Sam Presti liked you, we liked you. Trey is showing you as to why multiple GMs did like Tre Mann and what he can provide. I think there were some fundamental changes that he made to his game here in Charlotte, or at least some of the fundamental numbers changed. And Charles Lee has praised him all offseason long. They love what they've seen from him. Hitting his threes is great. How about some strong moves down in the paint? Love that. Love to see some strong finishes from Trey. He's also been a better passer in his time in the purple and teal. So I really like what we got from Mann. Absolutely Stangin, no doubt.
His offensive game, just the move selection that he has looked elite because he had the double clutch, going into guys looking for contact down low. And then he had 2 really slick step backs that created lots of space for him. And one went in and one didn't. But man, I mean, the moves just looked electric. And really quickly, Stangin or Clangin, his 2000s, early aughts, like throwback to the baggy jersey, bat and a headband. I mean, it looked like AI from the 2000 finals. I mean, what do you think? Stangin or Clangin?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all Tre Mann. The vibes for Tre are all the way Stangin, and that's always been true for Tre. Even I think people like the way that he played even before he might have been a consistent contributor, like he was with the Hornets, consistent contributor. Vibes, everything about Tre Mann is Stangin right now.
So after the game, Charles Lee said that Tre Mann knows who he is as an offensive player, but he was more impressed with the defense. He was jumping passing lanes. I think he ended with one.
Well, I mean, that's what I've said. This is what I talked about all last year. There are times like there's a difference, and I saw Rod tweet out about this too. And I know we get repetitive on the show when you're a daily podcast.
Which Rod? We got two Rods in the Hornets universe: Rod Morrow or Rod Boone.
Rod Morrow tweeted this out. He talking about Tre Mann jumping passing lanes, but it's what I was singing all last year. Tre Mann doesn't jump passing lanes to get deflections. He jumps passing lanes to get interceptions and then turn those into fast breaks. That's what he was doing last year, where he just outright reads the pass and then gets two hands on it instead of just he's a defensive back. He's Ed Reed in that regard at times. So love what he was doing defensively, getting out passing lanes.
I don't mean to derail this, but this just popped into my head, and I meant to mention it during our TJ Salaün discussion. But Evan, who is a frequent watcher of this show, and he
shout
supports
out Evan, yeah,
every Hornets box score. I have some news here. He said he had a Steve Clifford sighting last night. He witnessed the man. Now, I don't have a picture. I don't have proof of life. So, Evan, if you're listening, next time, carry a newspaper with you, today's Charlotte Observer, and hand it to Steve Clifford and snap a quick pic, a selfie. Just get the paper in there so I have proof of life. But he said he saw Steve, talked a little bit of TJ Salaün with him, and Steve was essentially like, this kid's going to be special. Watch out. So he's got the Steve Clifford stamp of approval, endorsement, the Donovan Mitchell stamp of approval, the Devin Booker stamp of approval.
It's been a good Steve, like the Steve Clifford notaries. Those have been good. Like if you got that stamp,
they've never been delivered to the Hornets. They've gotten notarized and then delivered to some other team.
That's right. Sorry, they got lost in the mail. I hope this one's here though. We have it. It's at our doorstep. We open up the package. It's here. It is in our possession. We love to see it. What's next?
All right, Brandon Miller, Stangin or Clangin, 12 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, third on the team, and game score at 9.7.
I think Stangin, like I know he missed a decent amount of shots. It's because he was taking a lot from three-point range. How about all offseason? Charles Lee was discussing how he wanted Brandon to not shoot the mid-range. He wanted to take a step back and shoot the three-point shots. Well, he had 1 2-point field goal in this contest. All of his shots basically were taken from beyond the arc, getting set up. I like the idea of that. I think Brandon Miller was Stangin.
Yeah, coming quick off those Nick Richards screens. Shout out to Nick Richards for those physical screens that he was setting, opening up space for Brandon, who was quick trigger, knocking it down, like less on the catch and shoot and more him evolving as a player who can generate his own three-point shots. Love that. And then to your point, it was about moving back to three, but it was also him getting a little closer to the basket on those 2-point attempts. It was less him pulling up in mid-range and him getting a little closer, which I think he drew a couple of early fouls on New York as a result. So that's a positive improvement as well. All right, Nick Richards, fourth on the team in game score, 8 points, 9 rebounds, subbing in for Mark Williams as the starting center. He was 4 of 5 from the field. 2 offensive rebounds, Stangin or Clangin for Nick Richards.
I don't want to say it for every player, but I'm going Stangin here. How about 3 blocks in 20 minutes for Nick Richards? If you like the block numbers going up for the centers this year, then that's a decent sign. 9 rebounds in 20 minutes too, just playing his role. Again, you mentioned some of the stats there, finishing with 8 points. Nick Richards, Stangin as well.
Yeah, again, they lost this game, but a lot of that had to do with like deep reserves, which maybe we talk about a little bit tomorrow, guys that are on the fringe making the team. But, they drew 61-61 at the half, and Nick Richards was a part of that, so I agree, Stangin as well. Miles Bridges, fifth on the team in game score, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 44% from the field, and 2 of 5, 40% from 3 as well. Miles Bridges, Stangin or Clangin?
I mean, yeah. Say it again. What do you want? I'm excited. I'm sorry. I'm excited. No, he was Stangin too. Like this is the whole operation looked good, right? We liked what we saw from the operation, especially from the players that matter and that are going to see a lot of minutes. Miles Bridges here, athleticism stuff for sure with Miles. I know it's been an entire topic of conversation over the summer Stangin for Miles. Like, all of these are pretty easy for me too, Doug. I haven't even been waffling on any of these Stangin, Clangin declarations. All of them, I like the process in its entirety.
So preseason is not about final score. It's not about whether you win the game, although I love to see Charles Lee, with the deep reserves on the floor. He was in the squat position looking like Roy Williams out there. Like, he wanted to win that basketball game very badly, the competitiveness. There was no question coming into the game, but I just love to see Charles Lee in action on the sidelines. A lot of clapping for his team. I mean, he looks intense in a good way, and I love it. Yeah, for Miles Bridges, so preseason, not about winning. I think it's about answering questions or showing things that you talked about at media day and training camp, showing what you've worked on in the offseason. And for him, it was about bounce. And so the highlight of the game for any player was him cutting, getting the pass, and yamming it on the Knicks defense. Powerful dunk, and got up really high for it. So he was confirming what he talked about and what we're going to talk about more, what he did in the offseason to get there. But I thought Miles, Stangin, and I thought it looked a lot like the game that I think we're going to see from him a lot this season, which is the third wheel. Yeah. The LaMelo, it's either going to be like LaMelo Brandon or LaMelo Man. So having Mark there to do those things, or having Miles there to do those things, I think are going to be important.
Let's end on this, but I think you can keep going down amidst the starters, right? I think the scoring hierarchy that took place in this game with all the starters, it's what's going to happen this entire season. It's going to be LaMelo leading the way. It's going to be Brandon, maybe even just barely leading Miles in scoring, but Brandon's going to lead Miles in scoring. I think the center position is going to outscore Josh Green, and Josh Green is going to bring up the rear in terms of offensive responsibility, putting the ball in the basket. I think what you saw in this game, number one, I would not be surprised if it was that order at the end of the season amidst all the starters. So
yeah, just a couple of clangins. I thought that the guys that were coming in, they were in a tough spot. They come off this trade. They didn't have a lot of time with the team in training camp. But Dwayne Washington Jr. missing the free throws at the end that would have given them the win. Daquan Jeffries with a bad turnover with a possession that could have put them in the lead.
A Tony Snell kind of stat line for Jeffries, like almost, right? There were a couple things that were recorded, but there's not a lot of recordings. In 19 minutes for Jeffries in this game, we got one rebound. We did have a couple of assists, but yeah, man, not a lot of stuff that he was picking up.
Now, we could talk about Josh Green maybe tomorrow, too. In his debut, only 5 points, 2 rebounds in 20 minutes, but he did a lot on the defensive end. I don't know if that's Clangin, but it's just kind of right in the middle of Stangin or Clangin. And then Harry Giles, he looked out of shape. Like, how do you sort of seems like last chance in the NBA, and he was huffing and puffing up and down the floor. I just don't understand how you come in.
Well, I don't know his injury. We should look at that, but I don't know if injuries did not allow him to do anything this offseason. Maybe that's the case. But
I don't know. It didn't look good. Didn't look like a guy that I'm super confident is going to make the. I mean, they've got to make some serious decisions here because they got a lot of people playing. Some cuts are coming, and
sure.
I just didn't see anything from him that I was like, oh, okay, great.
Last Clangin for me, Diabate. Like what I saw from Diabate. Thought he was active. Thought he was strong.
So that's a Stangin. That's your last
Stangin. I'm sorry. Yes, last Stangin for me. I did like what I saw from Diabate in this game. Just a nice little, nice comforting big man coming in, giving you some depth right there. So I like some of his minutes.
Well, with both Diabate and I don't know, he's kind of in between, right? He's not. Is he a center? Is he power forward? He's kind of sits in a soft spot there, I think. But Taj Gibson getting some solid minutes, like. I just love the fact that the Hornets can have one single injury at the center position and it doesn't look apocalyptic. You've got players that seemingly belong on an NBA floor getting minutes. Is Taj going to be an impact player for the Charlotte Hornets all season long? No, he's 39 years old. Like, you're going to need him to play sparingly to play well. But I just love that they can do that, and you've got a veteran presence there. It's like what I've been screaming about on teams in the past that claimed that they wanted to be competitive. This team is not even really, they want to be competitive, but they're not claiming they want to get to the playoffs. And those teams did claim it and then would leave the center position completely bereft of any kind of talent beyond Nick Richards and Mark Williams. So I just, Stangin for the organization for finally just doing the things that we've all talked about for years, just finally doing stuff that makes sense.
I think that's it. I think that's what makes sense for me to end on. Stangin for what we saw for the most part in preseason game number 1. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. That includes YouTube. Make sure you check out Doug's other pod, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Make sure you check out his Substack there, his subtext. You can find a whole bunch of info to get Doug Branson content. And then listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m., 92.7 FM on Wes and Walker. Have a great rest of your day. We got more basketball to talk about. We'll preview the Miami Heat preseason game number 2 and give you more observations on the game against the Knicks tomorrow.
Stangin'.